Welcome to the Seed File, folks. I have to get this video done. I'm not going to be able to concentrate on my other reading I have to do. But anyway, this is on my mind. All right. So you tell me what this passage is talking about. I'll read the passage, and you think about it for a moment, and then I'm going to tell you what it is. Signs in the heavens. We're told that there are going to be signs in the heavens in the end days and in the last times, and we are in the last days, and therefore we're going to see signs in the heavens. All right, let me read this to you. See if it sounds like signs in the heavens to you. We'll go here. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt. And they shall be afraid, pangs and sorrows shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain as a woman that travails. They shall be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. People are talking about 3 days of darkness coming up in this solar eclipse for April the 8th. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth. His going forth. Notice the pronoun there. His going forth. And the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. Therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place. So the earth would remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. And it shall be as the chase roe, and as a sheep that no man takes up. They shall every man turn to his own people, and flee every one into his own land. Every one that is found shall be thrust through, and every one that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. Their children also shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses shall be spoiled, and their wives ravished. Now, what do you think that's talking about? That's out of the book of Isaiah, chapter 13. What do you think that is talking about? The end of the world? Our generation? Let me give you a couple more statements out of Isaiah 13 and see if it changes your perspective a little bit. The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz did see. That's verse 1. We'll jump down to verse 19. In Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. So it's talking about Babylon. Now, we know historically, folks, that this destruction of Babylon occurred in 536 BC. So God is saying in this passage that in 536 BC, the stars of heaven and the constellations failed to give their light. They didn't give light. That the sun was darkened in 586 536 BC. That the moon stopped shining in 536 BC. And that he punished the entire world for their evil in 536 BC, speaking of Babylon. That he shook the heavens and the earth was removed out of her place in 536 BC. And this is the problem with how modern social media, end times prophecy gurus interpret Scripture. This is a passage that was fulfilled in 536 BC, yet it talks about all of these things that people are saying are signs of the times today. Now, do you think in 536 BC that the sun actually went dark? That the stars and the moon actually went dark? That the earth was actually shifted and moved out of its place? That the heavens were shaken? The problem we're having here, folks, is that we're looking at the passage from a 21st century English-speaking American or Western cultural mindset. We're trying to force upon the passage our culture, our language, our thought process, how we look at things. And we're trying to force that upon Hebrew Israelites of 536 BC, Babylonian people of 536 BC, and expect that they have to think and write and speak the way we do. How arrogant of us. This was metaphoric language. No, the earth wasn't physically actually shifted. And no, the heavens weren't physically actually shaken. And no, the sun didn't physically actually go dark. This is language that they used, their metaphors, their idioms, to say, a mass judgment is about to fall upon Babylon, and it's going to be grievous. This was their way of saying that. So, to come onto social media, YouTube, and all these places, and start reading these passages and say, oh, that applies to us. Oh, Isaiah 13 applies to our day. This is what's going to be happening with us as God brings worldwide judgment upon us. Is to deny the actual meaning of the passage and the actual audience relevancy of the passage and the timing of the passage. Babylon isn't going to be destroyed in 2024. Babylon was destroyed in 536 BC. And it's interesting because this is where those who don't want to give up their paradigms and their precepts, or their not precepts, but their preconceived presupposition ideas, will now shift and say, well, this is not talking about literal Babylon. This is talking about metaphoric Babylon, that the earth is Babylon, the United States is Babylon, and Russia and Iran are Gog and Magog. And you start just taking the passages and you just rip them out of their context, and you force these passages into your presuppositional paradigm concerning end times prophecy. Can't do that, folks. We can't do that. And that's why I roll my eyes and I just shrug my shoulders at the vast majority of these false teachings and predictions that are all over social media concerning prophecy today. I mean, the solar eclipse thing is just gone bonkers, and there's nothing to it. And they're talking about prepare for 3 days of darkness. Now, where does that come from? NASA's shooting rockets into the sun. I mean, okay, NASA does a lot of stuff. CERN does a lot of stuff. Yeah. And it's not always logical, and doesn't always make sense, and it's not always nefarious. Sometimes it's done for sinister purposes. Sure, I'll admit that. But what does that have to do with the prophecies that are written in the scriptures? Absolutely nothing. That's just human beings being what they are. Limited in intelligence, sinful in nature, and sometimes doing really stupid stuff. That's human nature, okay? So that's one example. Now another example, Egypt 19. This is where judgment comes down upon Egypt. This is also past fulfilled. Around 714 BC. That's according to Thompson Chain Reference Bible. It's saying that with a question mark about 714 BC on the fulfillment of this passage. Now listen to how this is written. The burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord rides upon a swift cloud and shall come into Egypt. So the God himself, the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ, is going to physically ride upon a physical cloud and kind of slide down into Egypt on this cloud. And the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence. So he's going to physically walk over after getting off this cloud and just start moving, just destroying idols in Egypt. And the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of them. And the Egyptians' hearts will actually literally physically melt, and they'll just drop right there. No, that's not what that means. Once again, it's metaphor. It's idiom. It's how they spoke at that time. We wouldn't speak that way, but they did. That's why it's important to understand metaphor and idiom. How about this one? Isaiah 17. I mean, Isaiah is full of this stuff. Woe unto the multitude of many people which make a noise like the noise of the seas, and to the rushing of nations. Rushing of nations. To make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. So nations are rushing around like mighty waters, physically. I mean, they're just shifting on the planet physically, and like mighty waters running around everywhere. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters. I don't hear anybody quoting that one and saying, "Oh, the nations are going to be moving around. America is going to move to where Africa is, and Africa is going to move where America is." Nobody's saying that. But God shall rebuke them. Yeah, America, get back over there where you're supposed to be. In Africa, get back where you're supposed to be. You're not supposed to be moving around like that. Can you see how ridiculous it is to constantly interpret this language as literal? Absolutely ridiculous. And shall be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind. So these nations are physically moving around on the globe, and then God comes down and starts chasing them back into the... Get back over there! and the nations are running, and God's chasing them. Get back over there where you're supposed to be. You interpret this from a 21st century English-speaking Western culture, it's going to get all messed up. But you know what? That's exactly what we do with the book of Revelation. And the book of Revelation was written in exactly the same type of language that Isaiah was written in. Metaphor, idiom, illustration. And the first century Jews understood that because they understood Isaiah, they understood Ezekiel, they understood Jeremiah, they understood Zechariah. And when they read the book of Revelation, they didn't interpret it the way vast majority of Western Christians interpret it today. They understood it was metaphoric language. Are you getting my meaning? And that's why the vast majority of these predictions and this fear-mongering and all of this stuff about blood moons and, the number 7 and, and Nineveh and Salem and the eclipse going over this, and it's just a bunch of nonsense. God has his providence and his sovereignty. Things happen, and they happen for a purpose and for a reason. But to take that and say, oh, this is definitely a sign of this, we don't know. Unless it's written clearly in here, we don't know. America is not mentioned anywhere in the Bible, and I know that disrupts and disturbs many people. Because we're all about America, and God's got to mention America in the Bible because look how great we are. That's not how it works, folks. It's just not how it works. Let's just take it random. Revelation chapter 6. All right, begin verse 12. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black. Wait, isn't that the same language that was used in Isaiah? As sackcloth of hair. Oh, the sun looked like sackcloth of hair. We better get some telescopes out. Take a look at that sackcloth hair on the sun. And the moon became as blood. Now, there is actually someone out there that actually stated, a preacher, that actually stated, he's on YouTube, that the moon would literally turn into blood and drop to the earth. I mean, seriously? It's the same language Isaiah was using. It's not talking about the actual moon turning into actual blood. It's metaphor. It's idiom. It's apocalyptic language. Sun and moon typically represent the nations and the shaking of the nations. Well, what's the shaking of the nations? It's God stirring things up. America's being shook right now by God. He's stirring things up. With all the people coming across the border and the talk of terrorism and, gangs starting to form in cities and Roman cities from people who came across the border illegally and sleeper cells, that's God shaking things up. The patriots getting stirred up and angry at the federal government and, the patriots ready to take up arms and fight all this invasion that's happening in America. That's God shaking things up. That's the earth being moved out of its place. Because that's how they would have said it back then. We have to understand the language. We'll end on this one. The stars of heaven fell unto the earth. The stars literally physically fall to the earth? No. It's talking about apocalypse. Apocalyptic events. Even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. So is this just some great giant fig tree out there in the cosmos, and God shakes it and figs fall off of it? Now, we understand that to be metaphor. Why can't we understand the other part to be metaphor? And the heaven departed as a scroll. So the heaven just kind of, all the cosmos just kind of rolls up like a scroll and disappears. Not physically, folks. This is spiritual metaphor, apocalyptic metaphor. And every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Now, do you think this is talking about mountains and islands physically being moved out of their places? No, it's talking about this is a disruption of that particular region. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman. Bondman? Rome had slaves. We don't have slaves today, unless you count paying taxes to the IRS a form of slavery, which I do. And every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. And said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne. Now, how did they know that there's somebody physically sitting on a throne in heaven? This was a spiritual knowledge. They knew it because it was being preached by the apostles and the disciples, and they'd heard this over and over again. And when the apocalypse hit them, when God came in and started to destroy Jerusalem and the temple, these words came back, and they're saying, oh no, it's the one that's sitting on the throne that's attacking us. Their thought process, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the unbelieving Jews that had rejected the Messiah, how many times had they been told to their face, you crucified the Lord of heaven, you crucified the Son of God? And so they hide from the wrath of the Lamb. And verse 17, for the great day of his wrath is coming. Who shall be able to stand? This is not talking about the end of the physical world. This is talking about the end of their Jewish world, the end of the temple, which was the end of their world. It was apocalypse. I mean, the temple coming down, that was total devastation to them. Food for thought. Look up those passages. Read them. Think about that. It's different. It's a metaphor. It's idiom. It's apocalyptic language that they used at that time. And what right do we have to impose our 21st century English-speaking Western culture and our way of understanding language and speaking? What right do we have to impose that upon the scriptures? Who the heck do we think we are? Nothing but humble servants bowing before the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on the C-Files.